so much for joining us. I wanted to draw your attention to your slide right now that's right in front of you. And this image is often used in education to highlight the differences between inclusion, exclusion, segregation, and integration in our classrooms, in our schools and in our classrooms. For myself, this meaning of this image has evolved over time. As an educator, I talk a lot about being a parent of a daughter with disabilities, along with being an advocate for quality health and physical education for people with disabilities. I've been following the work of a Canadian educator. Her name is Shelley Moore, and some of you might know her. She is originally from Edmonton and now based in Vancouver, British Columbia. Shelley Moore is a highly sought after teacher, researcher, consultant, and storyteller, and she has worked with school districts and community organizations throughout both Canada and the United States. Her research and work has also been featured at national and international conferences and is constructed based on theory and effective practices of inclusion. I wanted to draw your attention to the chat box if you are interested in learning more about Shelley Moore, but focus on this image that you see right in front of you. In Shelley's book called One Without the Other, and this was published back in 2016, she talks about how she explored this image that you see on the slide right now with her students in her course at the University of British Columbia, okay? As her students labeled each circular image with the terms inclusion, exclusion, segregation, integration, the majority of them agreed that the top circle that you see represents inclusion. And this is what our classrooms should be, okay? Now, I've transitioned to a new slide and take a look at it right now. And I zoomed in on the circle that represents inclusion. One of our students stood up and shared that they disagreed with this image. The student further explained and they said, "Look what you have shown us. I see a bubble with a whole bunch of green dots. And then there are a scattered handful of other colored dots. Well, in my definition of inclusion, there is no other." Shelley realized the diagram she was presenting was not one of inclusion. It was an example of the traditional model of education, the model where our goal is to produce more of the same, okay? In her book, Shelley shares that this model of education is a deficit medical model, and she was showing the class a perfect example of how it was still plaguing us today. In reality, our classrooms don't look like this. They are filled with students who are not green. They are actually filled with beautiful colors who are all different. Take a look at the next slide that's on your screen right now. And I wanted to quote a line from Shelley's book, One Without the Other, that will help frame our webinar today. The class continued to discuss what the conceptual diagram of inclusion could be, and together they decided that the only way to ensure that there was no other was not to make us all green, but instead to make us all of another. So I want to add in my personal point of view here, and I love this perspective of inclusion as it is a concept of disability justice, and some of you might know this term. It makes me think about what is normal, and that the so-called norm is a social construct that actually doesn't exist. And I had to deal with that for many years, just trying to figure out my role as a parent, navigating the education system, the medical system. And as a teacher, it also reminds me that we should be teaching to the diversity of everyone in our classrooms, all the colors that you see on your screen right now, okay? To Ophea, inclusion means creating a meaningful learning opportunity within supportive school environments where all students feel that they belong. And this word is going to keep coming up in the next hour. Inclusion is a process and a goal. It is an everlasting search to better ways to respond to diversity. At Ophea, we believe that belonging is essential to well-being, and well-being is essential to learning. And I'm going to leave that there with you for now, okay? Welcome, and thank you for joining us today to Ophea's Disability at the Forefront Q&A Power Panel. This is my jam here. Funding support for the development and delivery of this webinar has been provided by the Ontario Parasport Collective and the Ontario Trillium Foundation. My name is Andrea Haefele, and I'm a curriculum consultant here at Ophea. I use the pronouns she, her, and hers. We're excited for you to join us along with our guest panelists that you see on your screen, Jennifer Kill, you can give a wave, Aneka Porter, Laura Seckington, Jake Wttewaall, for an hour-long Q&A webinar where we will be sharing ideas and strategies for teaching physical education for students with disabilities in elementary and secondary school settings. Please note that this webinar will help position our upcoming free resource that will be launching next week on our website. My colleague will be placing the name of our resource in the chat box, and it's called Ophea's Disability-Centered Movement Supporting Inclusive Physical Education. Very excited that it's launching next week, okay? I also wanted to note that there's also that although this is a live session and it is in English only, the recap blog on the session will be made available in English, also in French on ophea.net later next month in November, okay? Okay, so I want to take a moment to acknowledge the land upon which Ophea's work takes place. Ophea's work takes place on traditional Indigenous territories all across Ontario. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet and work on these territories and recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on this land. We are aware that our settler acknowledgement uses language which may differ from language used by Indigenous peoples. Our land acknowledgement seeks to recognize the Indigenous territories where our work happens, and in a true spirit of truth and reconciliation, it strives to be more than just words. By learning, understanding, and acknowledging, we wish to pay respect to the rich Indigenous history of Ontario. Today, I would like to acknowledge the land on which I live, work, and play on. This is the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Anishinaabeg nations and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations. I come into this space as a parent and an advocate for my daughter Bella, who has varying disabilities, a strong advocate in education, sharing that inclusion starts by taking that time to understand that people are different and we do deserve to be part of a community as an asset and as a whole. I wanted to share our platform with the 4 panelists that you see on your screen right now. And to learn more about the panelists, I'm not going to read their bios. My colleague's going to place 2 links in the chat box, and these are from our social media platforms, Instagram and Twitter. And you can read more about their bios by clicking those links. But to start off, I'm actually going to pass the mic. I'm going to try something different. I'm going to pass the mic to each of the panelists. And I was wondering if you can share a little bit about 1 or 2 sentences of how you come into this space today. So Jennifer Kill, I'm going to pass it on to you. Please turn on your mic.
Hi, so my name is Jennifer Kill, and I come into this space as a health and physical educator. I specialize in really kind of working with students without a disability to work with students with students with a disability in the health and physical education setting. So we actually spend quite a bit of time working together, building relationships within the school and in the community.
Thank you, Jen. Very happy that you're spending your evening with us after a long day at work. So very grateful to have you. Aneka, I'll pass the mic to you if you can share a few words of how you come into this space.
Hi, my name is Aneka Porter. I'm a child and youth worker, and I've worked as a child and youth worker for over 10 years now in multiple different settings. But I also entered this space as a parent of a child who has multiple disabilities. And I'm really striving to be an advocate for him and also advocate for all the students that I work with in order for him to really be part of his school community. That's my big goal for him.
Thank you. Aneka, thank you for sharing that personal connection. It's really nice to hear that you have a passion in education already, but strengthening that with some your own child who's just entering junior kindergarten. So thank you. Very grateful that you're here. Laura, I'll pass the mic to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I'm Laura Seckington, and I am a elementary school teacher, and I specialize in teaching students with autism. And I come into this space both as an educator and also as a sibling to somebody with a disability. So I have seen the school system from two different lenses now. And for the past 12 years, I've really been trying to help champion an inclusive movement within the schools that I've worked at. And I think from when I started, I actually started out teaching in a treatment center that was designed specifically for students with disabilities. So there was no room for integration or inclusion. And I really found that as I moved through my career, that is the goal that I strive for. And that's why I'm here today.
Thank you, Laura. Jake, I'll pass the mic to you.
Hello, my name is Jacob Wttewaall. I have recently graduated from high school. I've experienced high school and elementary school. I have cerebral palsy, so I know how the education system works and how it feels.
Thank you, Jake, and very grateful that you're spending your evening with us. Your voice is very, very much valued here. So let's dive into this. I just want to look at the time right now, 7:45. Okay, I'm going to start off right now by framing our first theme, Know Your Learner. And on your slide, I'm going to read out the quote that I pulled out from the Health and Physical Education curriculum. The Health and Physical Education curriculum promotes important educational values and goals that support the development of character. These include striving to achieve one's personal best, equity and fair play, respect for diversity, sensitivity, and respect for individual requirements and needs, and good health and well-being. Okay. I've highlighted the last part of this quote because it really resonates with me because it talks about putting the student at the forefront. And this sets the stage for what knowing your learner means to each of us. Okay. I'm going to start off with our first question to the panelists right now. And Aneka, I'm going to put you on the spot. If we can just jump right into it. I was wondering if you can share the value of knowing your learner in the physical education class.
Well, I think firstly, as a child youth worker and also as support staff, sometimes we're in a unique position as we are able to work with students during instructional time and on-instructional time. And sometimes that allows for a little bit more of rapport building to happen during those times. And we can take those insights that we learn during on-instructional time and instructional time in building the rapport with students, finding out their interests, their likes and dislikes, and how we can use that to help support them in class. A personal experience that I can share, I was working with a student who had a different physical education teacher. So that teacher would come, take the children to the class. And I found that that student that I was supporting, had a bit of an anxiety, and he had a lot of sensory issues as well and sensory needs. So, after observing him a couple of times, I made sure that I was an advocate for that student. And I just said, I think maybe let's try out having him delayed entry. So let's let the crowd go in and sort of the noise sort of settle down and let him enter the classroom and sort of help him enter the classroom in a more calm setting to be more successful. So because I had that rapport with that student and I sort of had a good understanding of him and knowing him, I was able to advocate and share my insights with that physical ed teachers who they didn't necessarily have see that student on a daily basis. So I think it's as support staff is very valuable for us to take our insights and the things and the nuggets that we pick up about the students that we support and offer suggestions and our insight to the phys ed teacher, the homeroom teacher, and truly just work together to make sure that we're setting up that student for success.
No, thank you. And as you were speaking, I really liked how you stressed not just building relationship with the student themselves, but also building relationship with you as a child and youth worker. And in many cases, you are the advocate for that student who's trying to get what that student needs to access the curriculum. And sometimes maybe integration is not ready. That might not be the first step. It could be just successfully walking out of the classroom, going into the gymnasium, and that could be just the first step. So thank you for sharing that. Jake, I'm going to share the mic with you because I think you offer a very unique perspective as a student and sharing your experience of the value of educators knowing who you are and what you need. I was wondering if you can answer that question from your point of view.
For me, it's belonging, feeling that you belong somewhere. And sometimes you don't get it. For example, in my experiences in elementary and high school, I was always sitting on the sidelines. I couldn't participate. The other students didn't want to pass the basketball to me because of the predicament I was in. I feel like being in a place where you belong is so important that everyone should feel a sense of belonging. In my experiences, doing another activity and expressing your feelings for something you enjoy helps me feel like I belong. Like for an example, feeling of belonging for me would being able to talk to the teacher and understand any adjustments so I can have a little bit more participation in any activity. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think about the term disability justice, and sometimes it's as simple as engaging with the students, asking them what do they need. And in your case, you have the independence and the advocacy skills to do that. And I know sometimes in what Aneka's situation, students might not be able to do that. So it's really nice to hear that from you and your experience in the education system, that you were able to turn a challenge into a positive experience for yourself. Jen, I was wondering if you can build on that because you come from the secondary panel, and I was wondering if you can just share a little bit about the value of knowing the learner and the classes that you teach in your school community.
Absolutely. So I think knowing your students is the most important thing. Asking questionnaires, asking students, what sports do we want to do as a class? What can we do to involve and engage everyone? What equipment do we want to be using so that everyone can engage in the classroom? When I work with the students in the self-contained classrooms, we ask, like I will be able to ask the teachers and the A's in those areas to provide me with student bios. What are their likes? What are their dislikes? What will engage them in the physical and health education setting? So that's incredibly important to know and to value what each and every single student is saying in your classrooms.
Thank you. And I think that really helps set the stage in terms of, wow, like a teacher cares. They're really taking that time to know me. And I know later on in this webinar, you'll speak more of the leadership course that you are teaching and how that sets up both classes, the self-contained class and the leadership course up for success. So Jen, thank you for sharing that. Laura, I was wondering if you can jump into this question and share your perspective from the elementary panel. And Laura, you come into the space as a community class teacher. If you can give a bit of background of what that means and how you would like to answer this question.
Sure. I do teach in a partially contained class for students with autism. And what that means is that we are, for a certain percentage of the day, we are self-contained. We are inside of our classroom on our own, doing our own programming, and then we are integrated for some of the day. So how I want to answer this question is actually offering a really helpful tool to everybody. I know that Jake had said that having a voice in speaking with that teacher was really important to him. If I can suggest anything for finding out more about your learners, it's something called an advocacy card. And if you don't know what it is, you can Google it. You can find templates online. It's really easy. What an advocacy card is it allows a student to actually write a snapshot of what they need, what they like, what they're interested in, and what helps them best learn. And they're able to actually hand that card to any teacher that they encounter during their school day, during the school year. And it just helps bridge a gap between, I come into meetings and I'm telling you all about the student who's going to join your class, but why don't we let them do their best to tell you themselves? So it's a really great tool you can use, and even better, you can take some of those strategies that the student has listed themselves and actually incorporate those if you are writing an individual education plan for that student.
Thank you. And as we're speaking, I wanted to note that when registrants registered for this webinar, there were a lot of questions asking in terms of, are there lesson plans? Are there resources for students in wheelchairs or for students who have specific disabilities, and they named them? And I wanted to answer that question in a way where let's look beyond the what and move more into the why and the how. And that really starts by this theme, really taking that time to know the learner. For example, if I were to use this amazing game from a universal design approach where I'm able to integrate my 2 learners in a wheelchair, 2 learners who have autism, that might not work the next year if I have the same similar student profiles, because their likes might be different, their skills might be different, and their challenge. And that goes to play in any subject we teach, right? This actually leads into our resource that we're launching next week. And once again, I'm going to get this right. The name of this resource is Disability-Centered Movement, Supporting Inclusive Physical Education. And there's a section in this resource called Where Do I Start? Okay. This section is actually, it really provides educators and physical activity providers with the information on where to start when designing an effective physical education program for students with disabilities. So as you can see the different nuggets on your slide right now, this section is organized into disability groupings. And what that means is that each disability grouping has descriptions of what that disability is, examples of that disability, along with accommodations for that disability. So the accommodations range from instructional accommodations, environmental accommodations, and even assessment accommodations. Now, we're looking at this position as a starting point for our educators so that it gives them a jump start on how to help that child be successful in their classroom. I see a question in the Q&A right now, and I'm going to read it out loud. I am teaching an intermediate autism class. The students have their own physical education time. So I'm understanding this as they have their phys ed time, but it's self-contained, okay? This particular teacher spoke to the teacher and asked if parents had some suggestions of what their child could do, and was given no input from the family. What are some things that would be good to work on for these students with autism? Laura, I'm going to share this with you because I think this goes right down your alley and your experience with the autism class that you have.
Sure. So again, it is a journey. John, who asked this question, thank you so much for that. It sounds like you are in a more of a contained classroom, and then there's a different phys ed teacher, I believe. So I think working with that teacher is going to be really crucial. You know, it's interesting, as much as we are working so much with students and we have their needs in front of everybody else, I think a lot of people downplay how much work and time is going into actually collaborating with other educators. So I think meeting with that person, and hopefully it's welcomed. I always try to feel out at the beginning of the year. And if this is an opportunity of your, I'm guessing of your prep. So for me, I have a prep teacher taking my students, and one of those classes is phys ed. So if it is someone who doesn't have a lot of experience with that, you can definitely help them and show them the IEPs and show them different things that they would need to know. Looking at the curriculum for that grade level and what accommodations are needed, I think is the first thing you need to do. Finding out how you can communicate what the accommodations are for the students, and then going from there. Andrea, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, and sometimes students who are in the self-contained class, they could be working at curriculum level, which is okay, but they might do better in a self-contained setting first and move into an integrated setting maybe in term 2. And we'll speak more to the different settings and what that could look like later on in this webinar, but always start with your learner and then look in the curriculum for that specific grade that they're in. Can they meet those expectations, and what accommodations? So think of accommodations as access. Can I give to them to help them access that curriculum? If accommodations are not working, and it's trial and error, right? we're going to have to accept these challenges and these failures. That's where you pull back a bit. Maybe they need to be on a modified program. And again, we'll talk more about the whole IEP process, the individual education plan, in our second theme. So John, I hope that answers your question. Okay, we're good to go to the second theme. Is that cool? Okay, I'm going to close up this one so I can see where I'm going. Okay, theme number 2. You know what? As a parent, it's been very challenging for myself. And Aneka, I don't know if you can chime in. Just navigating the education system for my daughter, just to receive the appropriate accommodations and modifications like what John was asking, so that she can access her learning. So I'm speaking, I guess, from the other angle where I'm advocating for my own child. I actually used to think that educators who teach my daughter need to have extensive experience and expertise in working with students with disabilities. But now that she's in grade 8 and entering high school, I've learned that, yes, having that special education background and that experience working with people with disabilities is not the only thing that educators need in order to be successful at teaching my daughter, okay? I've actually learned that as a parent and advocate, that working in a collaborative environment has created the optimal environment for my daughter. And sometimes the teachers who don't have an experience in teaching students with disabilities, but who are very opening and learning and welcoming the parent voice, the family voice, the student voice, those are the classrooms where I find my own child thrives. And I'm going to jump into this second theme called collaboration. And the 2 questions on your screen say, what does collaboration mean to you? And what does it look like in your role in physical education? Jake, I'm going to share the mic with you right now, because I think this word speaks loudly in terms of the video that you shared with us on our at Ophea Canada channel.
First of all, I want to start off by saying I'm lucky. I'm somebody in a wheelchair, but I can advocate for myself. Mm-hmm. In my experience in high school, there's been a few times where I couldn't participate in this sport. And I got to advocate to my teacher, asking what I can do to participate. One of my favorite things I got to do was create a video of a sport I play, so sit skiing, and show it to my class, explaining what I do, how I do it, what I feel. And it just made me feel, again, like I belonged there. Other students could also look at me not as a different, but closer to an equal because of the sport I play. Just because of that one word difference, I was looked at as an equal. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Your experience is just resonating with me as you're speaking, because I need to form my words right now. It really speaks loudly, because sometimes schools, and correct me if I'm wrong, I want to make sure I say this right, the norm in what society perceives and positions people of disabilities is definitely a binary. And sometimes in my experience as a parent, and Jake, you also shared your personal experience, sometimes school settings present themselves where it's who deserves to feel safe, valued in schools, who is worthy and who is protected. And it took you to share your voice, to open that dialogue to that teacher so that they're able to say, hey, you can do this. You just need this instead. You can do this. I ski like this, and these are the muscles I use. And this is the conversation you and I had when we were prepping for this webinar, right? Really connecting with the teachers that were in your space and having these critical conversations to ensure that they were able to give you what you wanted. But you also noted that not everyone is as lucky as you who can advocate for themselves. And Aneka, I'm sure you can jump in right now just to share your perspective as a child and youth worker in regards to what does collaboration look like in your role? And also the second part of the question, what does it look like in physical education?
Yes, thanks, Andrea. So I think it's really, really important for everyone who works with that student to be working together. I've had both positive and negative experience as a support staff. I've met wonderful educators who really thought of me as part of the team, valued my input, and valued the sort of expertise that I may have bring to the table. And there were some times where I was just looked as an extra adult in the room or an extra body in the room. But I think it's very vital for us as educators to work with everyone who comes in contact with the students that we support. It's vital for us to gain as much information as we can about that student from many perspectives, from parents, from other teachers who may see them, from other support staff who sees them. One really good thing, I worked at one school where luckily, the students did leave school a bit early. They left school at 2:30, school ended at 3, and we had meetings on Friday. We stayed, we debriefed, and we shared the strategies that we used with certain students. This worked really well, this didn't work really well. And that for me really made me feel as part of the team. We all sat down, we collaborated, we came up with plans and new ideas, new accommodations, fun things that we can do for the students. So, just like Jake says, just as the students want to feel a sense of belonging, so we want to create that atmosphere amongst the staff as well. And I know sometimes school culture can determine that, but I will just encourage us as much as we can to just talk and build rapport with staff, not only the students, but it's very vital that we build rapport with the staff that we're working with so that we can just have cohesive plans that is able to set up our students for success.
Thank you. And you segued from Jake very nicely into your perspective as a child and youth worker. And it reminds me of building communities of care, right? Yes, there's a curriculum that we have to deliver as educators in physical education. But I really think that we call this a power panel today because all five of us, have strengths in terms of we're great educators, we're very great advocates for ourselves and also for the students we teach. And in many ways, in this room, we have 118 people here right now. We are part of a system where we all have a lot of power to make it part of our practice to advocate for our students at the forefront. And when we have those difficult conversations, and yes, it's not always going to be smooth sailing, it can open up so many kinds of interventions where we can validate the student's voice, their experience on how they experience their disability and what they need in order to meet the curriculum, right? So thank you, Aneka and Jake, for sharing that. I'm going to share the mic with Jen right now, because again, there were also a lot of questions in regards to the secondary panel in terms of what collaboration can look like in your school community. So I'll share the floor with you.
Perfect. So I'm actually quite lucky to be in a specific position that I'm in. Not only am I a health and physical educator, but I'm also the head of the department, which means that I can actually allocate space and time for courses. And one course that I work in particular is the Leadership and Fitness Recreation course, which is also known as PLF 4M. So this is a grade 12 mixed course, and we often use it as a fitness leadership course. And what we do with this program is we actually collaborate with our self-contained classes, and we have 6 self-contained classes, and we actually work together and in a physical education setting and work together and have gym class together, which is phenomenal. So we actually work with our self-contained classes. We work with the other departments to ensure that this time and space is there for us. So what happens in this class is now that students without disabilities, or the leadership students, are teaching phys ed or teaching health and physical education to our students with disabilities. And what we do in the class is we partner students up, and students kind of choose together who they want to work with, which is actually so important because, again, asking our students what they want, their opinions is incredibly important. And so we actually work together. We compete together because we are competing against other schools in our region. We actually participate in events. One of our favorite events is actually Special Olympics Ontario Unified Program. And the Unified Program means that our students with special needs play together with students without disabilities, like, for example, on the basketball court. We just hosted a soccer tournament this past week. So it allows for integration both in our class, the school, and then in the broader sense, the community. We also collaborate with other schools outside of our school so that we can ensure that there's great competition and collaboration with them together. So I hope that kind of gives you an idea of what is possible, because it does work in our school and it does work in our school community.
Thank you, Jen. And I really so number one, I'm going to preface this. Jen is the department head in her school. And just from scheduling perspective, the fact that you've allocated purposeful, intentional time for the self-contained class and purposeful curriculum time for that leadership course has really set up both of the classes for success, and addressing the curriculums on both ends. And really putting that at the forefront has really, from when we were meeting, right, has really built a sense of community outside too, and moving on into the competition area and teams, right? I'm going to share the mic with Laura. If you can also work from what Jen was saying and also providing the elementary perspective, because Laura, you and I worked together at our previous school, and we were able to set up the very similar structure as what Jen did, but for our little people. So Laura, I'll share it with you.
Okay. Before I go there is one Q&A I'd just like to read out. It was about my point about advocacy cards. Thank you, Danielle. Danielle asked if a student is unable to advocate for themselves. I'm guessing this means maybe a nonverbal student. Would it still be helpful to use them? Absolutely. You can definitely still use them. I've had many nonverbal students in the past, and I've kind of filled them out for them, but I do try to have them contribute in some way, whether that's with an augmented communication device, or putting a picture on of something that they like to do and then presenting that to the teacher. So definitely, yes, Danielle, thank you for that question. Now on to collaboration. Yes, Andrea and I worked together, and Aneka as well, many years ago. And building a relationship with staff is just as important as building the relationship with students. And Andrea and I worked really hard to build an inclusive space in the school where we worked. And I was beginning to work in a classroom for kids with autism, and it was a brand new addition to the building. So the building had not had even a handful of students with disabilities in it before. So you can imagine coming in, it was a very small school, but it really needed a lot of work in terms of building that education and awareness around students with disabilities. They just never seen it. They'd never seen it before. So recognizing that we were the advocates, we worked very hard. And luckily I had Andrea, but I've also worked with other colleagues as well. And while we can't, it's kind of like, you can't choose your family. You can't always choose the people that you work with. But if the opportunity exists, we always talked about, what class would be really great to put these kids into, what kind of feelings or welcoming behavior or language is used in this class versus this class. Where do I want my kids to go, and where do I want them to learn to belong? So definitely offering support where it's needed, and also where it's welcomed is important there. And also deciding where your priorities lie. So I integrated a lot of my students for other subjects as well. And whenever they're going into literacy or math or science, I always say say to the welcoming teacher, please make sure there's a desk for them. Please make sure that they have a desk with their own name tag. Nothing is worse than having a student integrate into a class and they sit wherever an absent student's desk is that day. It's really an awful feeling, I'm sure, and it's something that we want to make sure that we avoid at all costs. So deciding on those priorities and helping to uplift the students that are coming in as well. And Andrea and I did that with a lot of work. The beginning of the school year is very hectic, but we usually took the first month and we decided, okay, which classes are we going to do this with? We would meet with the classes before the students with disability entered, and we might do that over a series of days or a series of weeks. And we would talk to them about, in this specific case, it was, what is autism? What do you know about it? How do these friends communicate with us? What would you do if someone who couldn't speak to you needed help? How would we help them? So a lot of it was troubleshooting and kind of creating that base and putting in the legwork ahead of time before the kids with disability even walked into the class. So that was definitely what we championed at the school. And I just wanted to add that it's definitely a journey. Listening to what Jennifer has built, I'm sure that didn't happen overnight. It takes many, many years, and it takes sort of building capacity with the colleagues that you have, and hoping that it leads on to more things better in the future.
Thank you, Laura. And as you were speaking to building capacity, it also reminds me of building a culture of understanding, right? And that it doesn't turn overnight. And as simple as speaking with a teacher and having that conversation, hey, this is what you can do, as simple as having a desk for my student, or reading their advocacy card and providing these strategies when they come to you for phys ed, can be that door slowly opening to learn how to work with students with disabilities. So I wanted to jump back into this resource that we're launching next week. And in this resource, there's a section called Understanding the Individual Education Plan in Physical Education. There were many questions that came in as registrants were registering for this resource in regards to, how do I create a physical education program page? How do I know when to do accommodations, modifications, and alternative programming? Yes, there's a lot of information there and just navigating. And yes, it takes a lot of collaboration to create this IEP, right? So this section, it really supports educators in providing students with a well-rounded, accessible health and physical education program. And in this section, you can see on your slide the 3 nuggets. It helps you navigate the IEP process, individual education plan, but contextualizing it specifically for health and physical education. Also determining, does a student need accommodations, modifications, or even alternative programming, and what does that mean, okay? And last but not least, collaboration with the other community of care that student is in, whether it's the parents, caregivers, other school professionals, and supports that your school board may offer. So to come next week, check that out. And there's also examples of physical education program expectations for IEP. So check that out when it comes out, okay? I'm going to move into our third theme because I do want to allow some time for Q&As at the end too. And once again, I'll welcome people to use the Q&A function along the way. Theme 3, so what, now what? And the question on the screen says, describe what supportive, inclusive physical education means to you. So I'm going to start off by sharing that from my perspective as a parent and as an educator, an inclusive environment is one where all students thrive. And there is an inherent understanding that everyone feels like they belong. And Jake was speaking so well about his perspective and his experience in terms of when he felt like he belonged, that's when he was successful, whether it's phys ed class or his physical activity settings. And there's a variety of settings that this can happen in. I was wondering if I'm going to start off with Laura again. And if you can just quickly share a little bit about what supportive, inclusive phys ed means to you.
Sure. So supportive and inclusive phys ed to me, it means that everyone's able to meet their goals in different ways, using different strategies, and the environment evolves with the student and their different and unique needs. So, my program looks very, very different than it did 10 years ago. It looks different than it did perhaps, a few months ago. Constantly stepping back and assessing your own teaching and what your kids are learning. And what is your goal for the class? Whenever Andrea and I would teach together, we'd always find some time during the day, whether it's in the hallway, and just say, how do you think that went? Well, were all the students participating? Were they heard? Were they having fun? And if not, we knew that we needed to change it up. And to use the example, Andrea was awesome at, finding entry points for all of my students, but there was definitely times when we knew that something wasn't working, and we always changed it, evolved, moved on, tried something new.
Thank you, Laura. I'm going to share the mic with Jake. And perhaps this actually connects to the question that just popped into the Q&A. Jake, if you can share first in terms of your experience and perspective of describing what supportive inclusive phys ed means to you, physical education means to you.
For me, it starts off with support from the teachers, knowing that somebody is behind you, giving you a little push forward. For me, it's having that with the ability to have fun with the class. I look at volleyball. You could do volleyball, you could do seated volleyball. I'm not saying everyone has the same diagnosis and the same ability, but when you look at those things and you look at what students think of the sports, it's much more supportive around you. Everyone congratulates you rather than being on the sideline. So when students support, when the teachers support, it makes a huge amount of difference in your day and your experiences in class.
Thank you. And Jake, I really like how your experience and definition of support involves student voice, but also the adults in the classroom. And there was a question that was in the chat box regarding working with resistant staff and working in challenging situations. And Aneka, I know you're very experienced in working in situations where you're trying to ensure that you hear all the voices in the room, adults and students. Number one, can you describe what supportive inclusive physical education looks like to you, but also kind of touch on the question that came into the chat?
Yes, thanks, Andrea. So I think when you have resistance is always challenging, but first thing, it's just to always keep trying, always be open. And sometimes, offering different strategies, and sometimes it'll be trial and error. In working with different students, we may try different approach and different accommodations, and it may not work. It may be a total fail. And we have to learn how to step back, look, reanalyze. And I think open communication, just asking for support staff input, sometimes that can be a little bit of buy-in for them. I really appreciated when educators would come and ask me my opinion, or say, hey, what do you think about this? I'm thinking about trying this strategy with this student. Do you have any insight? So I think sometimes when you're working with resistant staff, if you can give them a voice, just like how students want a voice, support staff, we would like our voice to be heard, and we would like our expertise to be valued. And it may not always work. I can't really say there's a one size sort of fit all sort of answer for this, but I think engaging in open communication is the first step in doing and trying things. And trying different things and asking for their input. I think sometimes you might have to try, their buy them in that way. And when it comes to inclusive physical education, it means that all students are participating. Students with disabilities and students with without disabilities are all actively engaged in physical education. That's what it means to me. So like when I walk into a classroom, I'm supporting a student who is, maybe we have made some modifications and maybe we are doing some accommodations, but they are still an active participant in the class and in the activities. And also taking time to stop and analyze and saying, is this working? Is other students' goals being met? Do we have to try something else? I think when it comes to inclusive physical education, I think we always need to be analyzing ourselves and asking ourselves these questions, going back to the individual education plan and making sure that we're touching those things in order for that student to be successful.
Thank you. And I'm really happy you mentioned the individual education plan, because this document is so powerful in placing all the partners in education accountable for the student at the forefront, the student's learning. I do want to address the Q&A and also a question that came into the chat regarding supporting and working together in collaboration with other staff. In the section about individual education plans in our resource that's coming out next week, there's a whole section talking about the cyclical, guide in regards to how to support the learner at the forefront, working with all the partners in education, gathering the information, setting the direction for the student. Who do I work with in the school system to get what the child needs, and developing that program page? Because when I'm making the connection back to the program page, because that's what the student needs. How are we going to get them to meet the curriculum? Because if it's written in the IEP, it puts all the partners in education, the support staff, the EA, the educational assistant, the principal, the administrator, the parents, and the student accountable for their learning. Jen, I was wondering if you can build on this step in regards to describing what supportive, inclusive physical education looks like. Because again, it took a long time for you to build that culture in your school community. And it wasn't like a flip of a switch, like allocating gymnasium time is a huge discussion in the physical education world. So I'll share the mic with you.
Absolutely. So again, being able to talk to my admin and say, this is space that needs to happen. We need to ensure that all students of every ability have access to the health and physical education areas. So it's been quite nice to be able to have that environment. And again, with this leadership course that I run with the students, it's actually not necessarily the leadership students that are teaching. They're actually learning from the students with the disabilities themselves. They actually walk away every single day going, I can't believe what I just witnessed. I can't believe how much I learned from what we did today in class. So for example, today we were playing an actual small games of 3-on-3 basketball in the gym because we are training for our event coming up. And it's not a matter of necessarily student leader teaching. It's actually a matter of let's play together. Let's learn a skill together so that we can get to that next level. Because I do think it's important that we're working and combining those skills together. So I, as the teacher, would actually be teaching that and teaching everyone in the gym what skills we're learning. So it's incredible what we can see happening in our school, because now things like at lunchtime, our students in the leadership students actually want to have lunch with their partners. They don't want to have lunch with their friends. They'd rather hang out with them. And so that, to me, like that inclusiveness that we're seeing now in everywhere else is perfect. It's what we want to build upon for our community. We need to make sure we work together to have that supportive physical education for everyone. And what's nice now as well is I'm able to convince my colleagues at other schools, hey, you know what? We're hosting this event, but I need other students to help run this event. Could you bring your leadership class? Could you bring your students with special needs from your school to our school so we can have this environment and see everyone working together in this kind of beautiful relationship and being inclusive?
Thank you. And it made me think, and I'm going to share this with everyone in the room right now. Imagine what schools would look like if it was designed around disability, right? I think we really have to embrace the opportunity to shift the narrative right now, to redefine what quality physical education should look like, and not just with every single student, not despite of their differences, but precisely of their differences. And I think Laura, Jen, Jake, and Aneka are in a they've used their position of power to be able to shift that narrative in their own school communities to create a sense of belonging for all of the people around you, staff, students, and their families. So thank you for 4 of you for sharing that. I'm looking at the time right now, and I want to fly through the last few slides just to, I guess, close off and bookend what we've been talking about. So in this resource that's coming out next week, there's a section about physical education program planning in various settings. In this section, you're going to look at 3 different types of settings of how phys ed can be delivered: self-contained, integrated, reverse integrated, and explore the benefits of promoting each of these settings for different learners. So not all the time it can be self-contained, but it could be integration in term 2. Or like what Jen was describing, her leadership class starts with all that front loading of the content and how to work with people with disabilities. And when they are ready, she'll start reverse integrating them into the self-contained class. So this section is very valuable for those people who are asking questions regarding what does this look like? How do we do it? And where do we start? Okay. I also wanted to create a space also for the participants in the room who come from from program planning for physical activity settings outside of the curriculum. So first off, there are many students and participants who benefit from physical activity outside of the classroom. And Jake shared many of his experiences of where he felt a sense of belonging in his community when he was sit skiing and also playing sledge hockey in his own community, circle of communities. This specific section of the resource talks about, I guess, building understanding of what self-contained and integrated settings can look like outside of the curriculum environment, but also providing physical activities providers strategies to support participants with disabilities in these environments. So check out that when that comes out next week. And the guiding questions are very valuable because it not only talks about the physical safety of the students, but also the emotional safety. And each of us has spoke about that in our specific role in our own ways, okay? Before we end off, and I'm gonna pass the mic to each of the panelists to offer their own farewell to our participants. There is a participant handout that will be shared with you right now in the chat box, along with a participant survey. So please take a moment to fill out that survey because it will guide our team at Ophea to supporting, I guess, the resource rollout and also other upcoming things that we can provide in regards to professional learning opportunities for our participants in the room. I'm going to do another plug again. Our resource is coming out next week, which is free and it's online. And this resource has been designed to develop and provide support for educators in designing physical education programming for students with disabilities, and also approaches for physical activity providers to engage students with disabilities in enriching experiences to develop their physical skills. So check that out. I wanted to share the mic with each of you. And Jake, I'm going to start off with you. If you can share some last words, and we were discussing this before the end of our planning session. If you can have some last words to share with the educators that are still in the room right now.
Thank you. I was looking over a few of the questions, and one of the questions that really stood out to me was engaging able-bodied athletes with people with disabilities. For me, I was able in elementary school to be able to join a football team, not play in it, but coach it. It was a really exciting moment for me to be able to be there and to show my knowledge and my happiness to be able to travel and to be able to act the way that people without disabilities act. It was really interesting. Another one was, how can we empower people with disabilities in school and out of school? For me, sit skiing was one of the best things that happened to me. it's not just a sport, but it's also socializing, trying out muscles. And for a fun fact to end it off, I can drive. I've done the test and I was above average, they said. And they asked me, did you play any sports? And my response was yes, sit skiing. And sit skiing, it's so much more than just a sport. It helps you with speed, prediction, muscle, hearing instructions. Sports are so important, and that's why I think that it's we should all empower people to do stuff out of school as well as in school. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jake. And it's really nice that you have connecting it across your life, and being able to share those experiences in school and outside. Aneka, do you have any last words for our participants in the room?
First, I just want to thank everyone for joining us. And I just want to say, just encourage everyone to just keep trying new things and keep having a growth mindset with our students and just continue trial and error and open communication. And I think, we joined this field of work for a reason, and I just want us to just be encouraged, and it's going to take some time sometimes for change to happen, but just encourage everyone to keep pushing.
Thank you. Jen, any last words? Thank you so much, Aneka. Jen?
Absolutely. So keep advocating for your students to have gym times. Like I promise you, we will get to a point where every student will have access to gyms. Every student will be engaged. Everyone will have that opportunity. So keep advocating for that. And I promise you, we're growing slow, but we're getting there.
Thank you. Laura?
Similar to what Jen said, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. This really shows that you care. This shows that you're willing, and it shows that you want to learn more. And we're all constantly learning, all of us as well. And don't forget to celebrate the successes, no matter how small. That will really push you through. And keep working hard.
Thank you so much, Jake, Aneka, Jen, Laura. It's really nice to be in this space with you and to share this platform of advocating for these students with disabilities and creating these communities of care. On your screen right now, as you exit, please make sure you follow at Ophea Canada on the different social media platforms. I'm going to remind everyone, please make an account on our ophea.net website. This is a free account, and you'll stay connected with us on upcoming resources that are coming close your way next week. Very super excited to share this upcoming resource with you. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much for coming into this space with us. We'll be online for the next few minutes, but have a great evening and stay safe. Bye, everyone.